It is a huge opportunity for you if you have a firearm in the house. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. I want to mention some other controversy from back in 1998. Pay per view has been the way people made money in the cable business for a long, long time. And of course,
Yep.
Vince McMahon was one of the innovators. But at this point, he's no longer considered the king of pay per view. That's now boxing. And every top boxing event involves Mike Tyson. So the idea that Mike Tyson is perhaps going to be involved in some sort of fight, even though he's suspended, I
Right.
guess spooks the folks at TCI Cable. Now that you may not be familiar with them, but they controlled like 15% of pay-per-view all throughout America. That was Telecommunications Inc. It's not Time Warner. I know some people get that confused, but this is TCI Cable. And they're actually saying if Austin is going to fight Mike Tyson, we're not going to carry WrestleMania. And of course, not having your pay per view available to like 15% of the homes in America,
Yeah.
well, that'll stress a fella named Vince McMahon out pretty good. Now,
Yep.
of course, Vince knows we're not going to have him in a fight. So we have to even stop hinting around that or speculating around that, and we let it cool down. And Meltzer would even say if McMahon is stressed out about the TCI situation, the Mike Tyson and Don King breakup, or Shawn Michaels injury situation, he isn't showing it.
All right.
We've all heard this about Vince. Never let him see you sweat, never sell it, all that sort of stuff.
Correct.
On the way to WrestleMania 14, between January and March, this is a stressful time for Vince McMahon.
Yeah, a lot of decisions had to be made. It affected a lot of planning. There's no doubt about that. But we knew that as long as we could get Tyson as the quote unquote enforcer, and he have a role, a defined role at WrestleMania, then we're going to win. We're going to win. And Mike, being such a big fan of the business and a historian, I remember one time where he and I were talking. It was great because he was telling me about some of the great villains that he loved to watch as a kid in WWE. Because Mike got television, local TV in New York was plentiful, and Mike was one of the guys that would watch that. But he told me, it was like talking to a historian, Conrad. It really was. He had great recall, great memory of some of those heels back in that era, and why he liked them, why he liked their abilities and what they did. So Mike was not just a novice talent. He had great recall and was a true fan of the business. And being that, then he understood what the difference was a good baby face, what was a good heel, and he wanted to be that heel. He wanted to be special, and so I always appreciate Mike for that. I told Vince the same story. We ain't gonna have to worry about Tyson being a wrestling fan and doing the right thing because he knows what the right thing is, and I want to. It just worked out beautifully. So what we did worked. I think I know what your thoughts are, but I think what we did worked.
Yeah, there's no doubt it worked. I mean, you want to talk about an incredible success. That's what WrestleMania 14 would be categorized as. Vince McMahon had a pretty genius idea. He's going to be selling tickets for WrestleMania months in advance through mail order sales. And the result is, Dave Meltzer says, they sold out months in advance. 19,028 fans are in the building. 15,681 of them paid over $1 million at the gate. It's the largest gate for any event ever at the Fleet Center. There's another incredible $273,000 in merch. That's another all-time record for pro wrestling. That's $17.41 per head. Said differently, everybody left with an Austin t-shirt.
Seems like it, right?
I mean, goodness gracious. The match itself is maybe not the best match we ever saw Shawn have, but more than passable. They go 20 minutes and 2 seconds. I love Shawn Michaels' swagger coming into this. I know that he was hurting. I know that he had been miserable and in a lot of pain. But in classic Vince McMahon WWF fashion, we've got to get the match in the ring.
Right.
And they did. And I thought that, listen, we checked all the boxes. In an alternate universe, I know Shawn wishes he could have given Austin the type of match that he deserved here. But the idea is we've got Mike Tyson here. We want to see the stars, and we've got two mega stars with Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold. When it's all said and done, were you just thankful that it was over?
Yeah, kinda. I'm glad that we got our hay in the barn and called it a day. Uh, it checked all our boxes as well. You're talking about box checking. I thought the match checked all the boxes, and yeah, I'd like to see Shawn healthy and expand on the role. But I didn't think he did a bad thing. I thought a bad deal. I thought for basically his condition and his back and all these other things that he had going on, he was a handful with Shawn. And we didn't get the best Shawn that we would like to have had at that time, but he's still so good that the match itself, I thought, was very, very much passable. To be very gentle with your assessment, I thought it was very passable. And I wish Shawn had been healthy as well. It was the case, but he did the best that he could, and I just thought he and Austin had a great outing. People knew something big was going to happen, and Shawn saved everything he had to make sure that occurred.
It was an incredible performance by two guys who probably shouldn't have been in the ring, both with their own back issues, but they get it done. Of course, the next night, Vince McMahon is going to try to make Stone Cold his corporate champion. That's where we debut the new championship known as the Big Eagle to belt nerds like myself. But he also stuns Vince McMahon to really get that feud going. But fast forward a few weeks, and on April 13th, from the Core State Center in Philadelphia, Dave would describe it as one of the hottest 117 minutes of television in company history. He even says, in some ways, almost reinventing pro wrestling television. Of course, the idea is this is when we see Vince McMahon and Steve Austin make it clear they're going to have a fight. They're going to have a match later tonight. Austin, of course, was bragging that he could do this with one hand tied behind his back. On the other channel, they're loading it up with Sting versus Kevin Nash for the WCW World title. But this is the show that finally ends the 83-week streak by Eric Bischoff and WCW, and Monday Night Raw wins the rating war. And, of course, we know we didn't get the match we were hoping for with Austin and McMahon, but we are introduced to Dude Love as being a corporate puppet for Vince McMahon, if you will. This is one of the more iconic episodes of Monday Night Raw in history. And boy, it really was the one that broke the streak. I know that you guys are moving fast, and in the scheme of things, you're focused on your own business, not other people's business. But when you finally end the streak, does Vince have the guys out for drinks or something? Is it, do you do if this was a regular corporate job, we're going to have a pizza party. Like, did you guys celebrate this at all?
Not really. No, we celebrated a little bit, just as the fact that we pulled off what we were working on, and what we worked on worked. People responded to it. Minor celebration at the very least. All we did was create the best heel in the Attitude Era. His name was Vince McMahon. Dude Love was there to take bumps and to feed Austin, and to be able to have a better match than Vince would have with Austin. And Austin and Dude Love had great chemistry, and Mick was so easy to work with. I applaud Mick for his professionalism, because he made sure that they got a match out of he and Austin with the McMahon name on it. And Austin, with one hand tied behind him, was a little bit vulnerable, to say the very least. But it worked out pretty good. They had a decent match without question, and I enjoyed it very much. My book, Business is About to Pick Up, is still out there. I got signed copies at my website, but I was just looking back at this. I think we had a little part of that play-by-play, and my thoughts were documented in that book on the Foley scenario. So it was somewhat complicated, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't. So, the thing about it is that what we accomplished, what we looked out to accomplish, Conrad, was that that Mick Foley was coming in there as a surrogate, and Vince was going to be the primary scenario. Vince wanted to work, he wanted to wrestle, and so when the head honcho wants to do something, they normally did, and Vince wanted to get that done, and he got it done. The idea was that our top heel was going to be Vince McMahon, no matter how we sliced it. So we needed to be able to get a match out of those two guys, and I think we did. I think at the end of the day, we did. I can't remember the exact scenario, but
it was a series of matches. Foley was a fantastic opponent. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, people look back at those matches that they had in April and May, and people talk about those as maybe Austin's best opponent for 1998. Just phenomenal matches. As the Dude Love character, that is maybe one thing I wish we could go back and change. I would have loved to have seen him being there with Mankind or Cactus Jack.
yeah,
But still, you get Mick Foley. It doesn't matter what persona. You know he's going to give his all in the match.
that's true.
What did Austin think of Foley as a first opponent of his new Austin era?
He had no problem with it. They had great respect for each other, and he knew that Mick would be wary of Steve's injuries and work accordingly. So it was. I think it worked out real well. I can't think of anybody on the roster that we could have put in that Foley spot that Austin would have been more comfortable with, and that was important at that time. Let's make sure that Austin is comfortable with what we're doing.